really want it published right away, but it was called The Cleansing of America. And he said something's going to happen that will create such a problem that eventually people will look around and say, how do we get here and how do we fix this situation? And he goes, and then there will be a group of people that have these principles and knowledge, and they will be looking for someone to help them. So what we're talking about is Jeff Allen started a kind of a project and saying, we've got to have a group of people that have withdrawn from the system enough that they aren't relying on it, right? That you know how to homeschool a child, so you aren't relying on that form of education. That you've studied maybe natural healing and things, so you aren't stuck with going to that doctor that maybe is going to do things that you don't agree with. You have your food storage, so if there's a shortage, you aren't going to be in line and they force you to say something or do something, right? You have the autonomy to make your own decisions. So it's kind of a withdraw and a replace format. I'm probably working on this 2 years, getting this established, and now it's time to introduce it to some people that have a similar mindset, because a lot of people within your religious circles or friend circles, they think socialism is a type of God's law.
Law of consecration.
The law of consecration.
Yeah.
And so you can't, if you gathered with those people at a time of crisis, everyone would be needing to be fed and healed and do. Well, you can't help if you were totally depleted. You have to have a little lifeboat to row along with a like-minded group of people so that there's enough of a life raft to start helping others. That's the concept. So I love Jeff. He's a wonderful man. He has a background with Skousen. He was in California, I think, when Skousen was alive and working with President Ronald Reagan. Reagan wanted to put the Making of America textbook in as California's civics textbook. Wouldn't that have changed the world? Almost was done, except for a little line about a pickaninny, which is a term
the word pickaninny
used by back in the day, and that term, which meant just they would have the rose in their hair. It was an endearment term. It wasn't even a bad thing, but one of the judges, and you even said who it was, but picked up on it and said, "We will never." Oh, I knew who it was. What's her name? She's a crazy
Maxine Waters.
It was
Maxine
Maxine Waters.
Waters? Oh.
You know, I was never get this into our school board.
Maxine Waters.
Maxine Crazy Waters. Right?
Yeah. She is a lunatic.
She's the one that stopped that book from going to California. Had it gone to California, imagine what a difference in our education, because what goes there tends to be. And they would have a solid foundation on the principles of government.
That book is the Federalist Papers.
And it is the Federalist Papers, the 5,000-year lead. It's all of it together. I would say if you're going to get a book in your library to teach your children from, the Making of America civics book, the Making of America book, is like your history and your civics all together in one book. Great for your library. Just a fantastic one. So I think I will introduce, and I don't want to give all your background. Maybe you could just give a little bit more of your background, but he's worked with groups and training that has kind of given him an inside look. We talk about the World Economic Forum and what they're doing. He has worked with groups and in banking that he kind of understands what's coming, and now it's coming faster. And so he saw this. I was like, we need to really get organized. And so Al and Julene are part of this kind of our little, what would you call it? Kind of
Capsule.
Our capsule group, that as we kind of discussed how we could get this done in the easiest way. And it's something that's so easy, and you guys are so prepared to step into something like this because it's in you. The training's already in you, and then you can become captains of your own little ships, because it's the gathering in tens, and then those become gatherings of 50s, and those become, it's biblical, but we need to start with our little gatherings of 10. So we can start here, but then those 10 will go out and get their like-minded group, right? And then it's a loose affiliation. It's not like we're giving anybody's names and numbers or anything, but it's this nice loose affiliation of like-minded people that know one another, that can weather the storms. That's really what it's about. So Jeff, do you want to come up? And
My turn?
It's your turn.
So Maxine Waters.
Oh, that's just scary.
So
Don't trip on that.
I'm going to do my best. So let me tell you about me and Maxine Waters.
Yeah.
So 40 years ago, more
Can
than 40
you see
years
here
ago,
your face?
my eyes aren't good enough. I can't tell. Yeah, I think I can.
Can you see? Okay. All
Right.
You might want to step over a couple before we're looking at that. Can you see him, Nancy?
Because I'm going to be moving around. I can't stand still.
Okay, all righty.
So we'll see how it goes.
All right, we'll do that until you.
So-
They can hear him.
Yeah.
Over 40 years ago, I started working for Dr. Skousen, teaching seminars on the Constitution, and I was what was called the California director, so I was in charge of California. After that was over, I was known a little bit, and so I would get asked to give speeches, come to groups, and so I'd been invited to speak at a Republican women's group in Pasadena, California. And I woke up the morning of that event and I could not talk. I could whisper, but I could not talk. And that's never happened before, and it's never happened since. And so I couldn't go. So I called up and whispered to a friend, "Can you cover for me?" And he did. And then they invited me back for the next month's meeting. And there was a lady at the second meeting who wasn't at the first meeting. This lady's name was Jane Crosby, and she had just been appointed the chairman of the California Bicentennial Commission for the Constitution. And so I gave my speech, and when it was over, she said, "Would you be interested in being the executive director of the California Commission on the Bicentennial Celebration of the United States Constitution?" I said, "I guess so." So I got invited to their initial commission meeting. So there was Jane and there were some commissioners. And it was basically a job interview. And so I showed up, and they'd already been meeting, and what they had done before I showed up was adopted the Making of America as an official California bicentennial book. And then they interviewed me. They offered me the job on the spot. They wrote up their minutes, and they reversed the order of things. So it was, we appointed Jeff to be the executive director, and then we adopted the book, The Making of America, and it made it look like that was me that did that. So Jeff Allen comes in, having worked for Skousen. The first thing he does is get the Making of America book accepted as this official book. I mean, that's fine, but that's not what happened. And so this gets out there, and there was a day when it hit the news that literally from the minute I was in the office until the day was over, there were newspapers and radio stations calling to talk to me about this book. And the reason it was so controversial was because in the book, Skousen quotes a Pulitzer Prize-winning author who, in that quote, said that slave mothers would refer endearingly to their babies as pickaninnies. That's as bad as it was. And so everybody wanted to know about that. And so that was a long day. That was like literally call after call after call. There was a no restroom break day that day. Well, when the commission was looking for state funding, Maxine Waters was the chairman of the state budget committee for the assembly in California. So that's who I was going to appear in front of. And so I put together these little booklets of all the things that we were doing to hand out to the members of the committee when it was my turn. And I showed up at the committee meeting, and the room was packed. And the witnesses at the time were a couple of men from George Deukmejian's office, because they were pitching the governor's budget items. And Maxine Waters wouldn't let them finish sentences, would ask a question, they'd try to answer, she'd interrupt. And then she finally just says, "We're done." And they're like, "But we haven't finished." She says, "Yes, you have, you're done." And so they gather their stuff and leave. And she starts looking through her agenda, page after page. The Bicentennial Commission, I've just been getting warmed up for you. And so while I'm walking up to the table, you know how it is, you have the tables and they're up there, and I've got my stuff, and while I'm walking up, she says, just how much money do you think this pickaninny's going to give you? Now, I had tried to reach out to her beforehand, and she and her office lied to me about availability. And so that was kind of like my first real dose of how corrupt and messed up government is. It does not function the way we think it functions, although we're getting a bigger clue now. So anyway, you reminded me of that story. So
Well, that's quite the story, and that she's still in a position of power.
Yeah,
It's just
frightening.
incredible. You know, her area is over an industrial area, so there's tons of money and taxes, and not very many people. So she just has to confuse, you know what I mean? She's just been there again and again over a lot of money. It's a sad state of affairs.
she's evil.
Yeah.
She is evil.
So, so that was back in 1986. Now, you know, you also reminded me of another thing too, and that is you talked about Dr. Skousen and the seminars on the Constitution. My mom was the one who organized the very first Making of America seminar in California. And so my mom was dialed in on this stuff. And so over 50 years ago, my mom was going and talking to school teachers and principals about humanism. We don't refer to it much that way anymore, but it's still out there. Situational ethics, sex education, all these kind of things. I was embarrassed by it. You know, I didn't know what was going on. But at my mom's funeral just a few years back, my dad was recounting all these things my mom was involved in, and I thought, oh my gosh, you know, 50 years ago she was dialed in on this stuff and was trying to do things about it. So, you know, when we talk about where we are today, and we talk about it's been going on for a long time, literally we're talking decades of effort to lay the rails that, you know, the progressive train is rolling down these, you know, now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, yeah, Robin.
I just want to say, but it was the mother, right, that saw these arrows coming into the nest, and it will be the mothers, I think, because men don't tend to look at the women, right? They don't even notice them. I think we're like a silent weapon. You know what I mean? But you really are the web of society that keeps everything connected. We know we're all interconnected, but you get that information out. And it's interesting that now this has gone from Sisters of Liberty to Moms for America, and through some connections that Tammy did that was pretty amazing, that now Julene's teaching of Making of America and the 5,000 Year Leap is going to be translated into Chinese. They are doing it now.
Yeah.
So, and these people are they've lived under communism. They know what it is. They're so hungry. And when they found out that it wasn't your land, it wasn't your water, it wasn't that made you great, it was these principles of liberty. Whoa, you mean anybody can learn these? They were just, they're on it. They've already had the 5,000 Year Leap. It gone into Chinese. The guy that's kind of heading it up, he has over 15 million followers. And they're talking about this. So this is really fantastic, right? We don't realize how far, you know, your mother, Skousen's humble beginnings, really looking at the principles that Jefferson took out of the Bible to put into our Constitution, that it's God's law and man's law together, to be a shining city on the hill. There can be many Zions in many nations, but they have to follow these principles.
So that's the perfect segue, because I'm not going to miss the opportunity to get to know each of you a little bit. So we're going to go round robin, and I'd like you to tell me your name. I'd like you to tell me how long you've been a part of this group, and one thing that you love about our country. So I don't want to spend a ton of time, but we're going to pick on you, Robin, and
Okay.
start with you.
I'm Robin Young. I've been on this train for probably 2009. We started a group in Oregon, then Julene moved here and worked with Colette, and this is what's evolved. And then somebody from Hawaii, whose husband worked in the Pentagon, knew Julene and reached out to her and said, can we take this on a national level? And that's how it's gone now to a national level. They're expanding it. So we keep our humble beginnings because we want to reach out to the women. But we've had, now we have our Zoom and Nancy puts it out on the live stream. So we know that we've had at least like 10,000 hits on even one class sometimes. So it is reaching out and it's resonating with the people that are like-minded. So that's a thing that's been pretty fabulous. So, and what's something that I love about this country is that it was set aside and founded by God, for this restoration, for this time. And it's so important.
Thank you, Robin.
Hi, Carol Ferguson. My background is my dad was in the Air Force and then my husband was in the military. And so we moved around a lot. We did live in Virginia for 30 years. My husband was the chief of staff for John Peterson and for Jack Fields, Houston, Texas, and Pennsylvania. I was a secretary. Congressman.
Uh-huh.
I was a secretary for Jim Sensenbrenner from Wisconsin. And I worked with county government in Virginia. They call them supervisors instead of commissioners. I was chief of staff for that. Have been involved for a very long time in politics and what's going on and researching what people really are instead of just what they say. Because people, I think, in this last convention, there was some of that. There was Brandon Gordon who is running against Bill Lee for Commission Seat B. As I went to a lot of meetings, he was saying that he's conservative, he supported lower taxes, he supported smaller government, but when I went to check on his record, he raised taxes in Spanish Fork 4 times in 9 years, and he was supporting larger government. So I think the reason Bill Lee did not get 60 delegates at the convention is because people did not research. They thought what he said was what he was, but I think that your past performance is a predictor of how you're going to perform in the future. And so I do look at records before voting for somebody. I love this country. I was raised in a military family where if you ever saw the flag, you stand and you put your hand over your heart. This is a country where if you put in hard work, you can do whatever you want to do. And I love this country. I've been told too many times for people when I've tried to get them involved in things, that's nice you have time for that, but I'm too busy. So it's important for everybody at whatever level they can to be involved and know what's going on and not just take people for their word. Don't trust what they say. Look at their records.
Excellent. Thank you. Hey, your turn.
Marilyn Jones. I've only been involved with Sisters for about 1.5 years, but I've been learning about these things for about 10 years. And what I love is this country this is where the gospel was restored. This was the chosen area where those things could be put into place, that we've been so blessed to have the gospel as our foundation as well as the freedoms that we have in this country.
Wonderful. Thank you. Hey.
Melanie Biggs, I don't know how long, like 8 years, is that, yeah, and so, and I love this country because I am Joseph Smith restored all of this gospel, so that's, yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you.
I'm Marilyn Light. I found out about this group probably about 7 or 8 years ago and started coming, and I've just been coming since, and I've just been amazed at the women and the men that joined this group, even though it's called Sisters of Liberty. What I love about our country, I've done some traveling overseas in the last few years, and I am just amazed that no place feels like America. Not even Puerto Rico, which is owned by America, feels like America. And everybody, you start to see our country through other people's eyes. Like we went to Egypt recently, and they're all, America, America. They love America, and they know that if America goes down, the world goes down. They are praying for America. I hear it all over the place. We are praying for America.
Thank you. Colette?
Yep, Colette Pearson, and I started this with Julene Jackson 12 years ago.
And it's been wonderful to get to know so many glorious women, and the love that we have for one another is truly amazing. And what a spiritual experience it has been to hold these in my home. And the thing I love about America, I gravitated to this. I started watching Glenn Beck, and that's how I came together with Julene, because she went to Washington, D.C. for his rally, and I know Robin went. And I did not know how much I loved our country until I started this. And I agree with you. I went to Tahiti and then went to the temple, and they came up, we love Americans, patting our cheek. And we are the shining city on the hill, and we are watching it slip through our fingers. And I just want to share that with anyone and everyone that'll listen, because it is the law of the land for our millennial reign. It's God's law. And so I just want to share that with anyone and everyone that'll listen.
Thanks, Paulette. Okay, your turn.
I'm Nicole, and I've been coming here about 7 or 8 years, same as a lot of these ladies. And actually, when I moved here from Seattle, I knew that there would be a class that I would need to go to. And I was here 5 years before Julene, who was in my ward at the time, told me she created it. So I was so glad for that. What I love about America is that anything is possible, and that there is terrain in the land for all those who come here that remind them of their homeland. And so they can feel at peace here and know that there's a place for everybody, you know?
Awesome, thank you.
I'm Eileen Erickson. I think I've been coming about a year. And I'm privileged to be one of these great sisters and to learn about how we can help maintain what we've got. And what I do love about America is the freedoms, and that it was established for the restoration of the gospel. And I've been to some other countries too, and I can see the difference, and I would not want to live in those other countries.
Thank you.
I'm Ann Hottie, and I think I've been a part of this group about 2.5 years. And what I love about America is kind of what's been said, the liberties that we have based on righteous and virtuous principles. And I think I just took that all for granted until COVID, and we had the mandates. When they had the mask mandate, just the feeling of being forced to do something against your will, I just felt that fight in me, like get out that title of liberty, and I'm ready to fight for, my liberties. And so anyway, that's what I appreciate.
Thank you.
I'm Isabel, and I think been coming about 6 years. And I wasn't born here. I was born in Scotland, so that it's not like being born in the third world country or something. But I love, one of the things I love about America is the melting pot, because everybody can come from no matter where, and they can have opportunities and establish themselves, and that's what America is everybody from other places.
Thank you. Hey, your turn.
Lenore Ashby, and I think the thing that I love, I'm like you, I kind of took growing up here for granted, felt peaceful, secure, this is the promised land in the Book of Mormon. But when we lived in Romania for 4.5 years and I saw the real effects of communism, it made me appreciate our home here so much more. People would, in your own apartment building, not look at you or smile at you, because there's always a person in there that reports to someone higher up about what you are doing. And people would get put in jail all the time for nothing. Our freedoms we take so for granted. And when you live in a country, it's more than just visiting. You really get to experience what freedom and liberty is and how precious it is.
Thank you. Okay.
Kathy Mock, and we grew up military. Our father was a bomber. We're sisters. Our father was a bomber pilot, so we lived in SAC units at the end of the runway. We just grew up in strategic area, doing that. And we go to movies, and before we go to the movie on base, they'd have the Pledge of Allegiance and the Star Spangled Banner, and it was just, that's just the way it was. I mean, growing up with it, you just know that that's the way it is. But I think there was an innate love that came from that. We have one brother, and he was military also. Just there. One of my greatest treasures, though, is from China. Was made in China, and that's my daughter. You know, she's a little Chinese girl. And I know that she was sent here for a reason. She doesn't speak Chinese, but she's from there, and she's here for a reason. But I just have an innate love for this country, just because God put it there. I've been compelled the last few weeks to read the end of Majesty of God's Love I've read it twice, but the end part, because I thought there's something there. And I'm so dumbfounded right now reading it. I didn't realize when I read it twice before. These are the founding fathers that didn't even know the Book of Mormon. They didn't know Joseph Smith. De Tocqueville came here in 1830 when the church was just coming around. And they were so spot on. It's just like they had been early prophets, you know, in the Bible that had visions before them. And I am just dumbfounded at what they knew and how far we have strayed and what it's going to take to get back. And it's kind of scary when you think of what it's going to take to get it back. But then when you start reading about the hope in there, the church, it was all organized by God in wards and things, and that's going to be our vehicle to saving the world, you know, saving the gospel, saving freedom and liberty. And I'm just a little passionate.
We couldn't tell. Okay, thank you.
I'm Heidi Rock, her sister, and I'm passionate too, but she's more verbal than I am. I'm shy.
They've been coming about 9 years. They did tell
Okay.
me. 9 or 10, yeah.
However long it's been.
Yeah.
We're the oldies here. So. And when we came here, we were invited by a friend of ours, and we were already going to a class on Wednesdays, and we just thought, well, we'll try it. And we just had to come once, and that was it. We knew that this is where we're supposed to be. Being raised in the military, and I just always had a love for this country. When they'd have the early morning, I don't know that they even do them anymore, but some of the cities, we lived in Pleasant Grove, they'd have the early morning, 4th of July, like early morning, 5:30 to 6. Flag raising, and then they'd bring in people to speak. My family would all sleep in, but I'd always go. It was just in me. I had to be there. And through this group, we've learned so many things about the founding fathers. I can go through each one of these things, and you know, the rights that we have, going out of the country and coming back in. Even with our kids, they would even cry because they came back here, and it was just so wonderful because, of course, we speak the language, the same language here. It's different when you go down to Mexico. But they enjoyed visiting, but we always want to come back. So I just love everything about this country. Well, lately. If we were back to what used to be, growing up, the principles and things that it was founded on. So.
Thank you. Okay, your turn.
I'm Helena Kleinlein. I've been coming here 3 years, thanks to Nancy, who introduced me. I was raised in England, so I was raised under a socialist country, saw a lot of things that don't ever want to come here. My father paid 66% of his salary to taxes and still had to buy private health insurance because it would take so long to get in to see a doctor, paying $10 a gallon for gas for as long as I can remember. And when I first came here, I remember telling everyone, America's kind of on the same trajectory as Europe. You're just about 20 years behind it. And I am floored now, just in 2 years, how America has totally almost caught up to England. We're not at that tax rate yet. But under this current administration, we will be, you know, if we don't change that. And what do I love about this country? I will echo what everyone else has said, but I think what really drives it for me is knowing that this is God's promised land. This is the land that was given to the house of Joseph. This is the land of Adam and Eve, and it will be the land of Zion in the millennium, and it is worth protecting.
Thank you. Okay, your turn.
How can I say more than
That's how I felt. I'm at the
Ditto.
end- We're at the end of the line. I was invited about 2 years ago, and I am one of those who was sound asleep before I was invited to come. I just have not been involved in anything until I started coming here, and I'm woke.
Awaken.
Awaken.
Yeah.
Awaken coming here, and I've had an opportunity to travel a lot too, and know people from outside of this country. And what I love about this country is it's hope. It gives us hope. And if you have, I see people outside of this country who have no hope, no reason to hope other than to just do the status quo. And here, you have a dream, you have something you want to accomplish, and Americans just do things. They want to make things happen, and that's because of the hope that this whole foundation gives us that other people around the world don't have.
Thank you. Okay.
I'm Sandra Van Bloom. I think I've been going here, 3 years, 2 years? I can't remember, time is, I don't do very well with time.
Is it like pre-pandemic or post-pandemic?
Pre. It was
Okay.
pre, actually.
Closer to 3 then.
Yeah. The thing that I love about this country is everything that's been said, but also I have the opportunity, this is my first year as a delegate, to really understand politics from the roots of your town and your people that you live with, and how we have so much power if we will use it properly to make it turn to the truth. If we can stay on the path of listening to the Spirit, because there's lots of politics in little town politics.
Yes, there
So,
are.
anyway, I appreciate being able to be in the system of
So are
finding
you
our
a
people.
county and state delegate? Or
I'm just counting,
county? Okay.
your county and state. That's just it.
Excellent. Glad you're here. Nancy?
Oh, well, thank you. I love that the Spirit ratifies self-evident truth, and that's what the Constitution gives us. And I loved Cleon Skousen ever since I knew him as a young teenager. Learned the Constitution from him personally in his little booklet. He cared about me as much as any important person. And I saw that over and over again at the Freeman Institute. My mother was the National Director for Family Studies there, and I would go perform with fiddling and stuff at those, and met a lot of important people. But it just helped me to see. I even met Henry Kissinger back before we knew all the deep state stuff. But anyway, it's just, he interfaced with everybody in beautiful ways. And I ended up working for a senator back east, and my major was international relations, which is political science. And I knew I didn't want to become this big ambassador or anything, but I knew it would play an important part in my life. And my mom ended up writing a play called Patriots and Petticoats, and I feel like that's what we are currently. And I grew up loving, I take, the advanced history classes, and it's like, that's not how Abigail Adams was with her husband. Like, my mother had shared those stories with us, and of great women in the church too. So I've always felt like she and my sister were both suffragettes in many different ways, and they kind of were opposite poles. So I kind of got the best of both with the things that you've been studying, the world type things. But anyway, I appreciate this country because of the promise it holds for the whole human family. And I know Mother wants all her babies back, meaning all of the human family. And I know our Father in heaven has a plan for that. And it will come together in balance, and we get shaped up a little bit, but hope. I know that's what the hope is of every human being that's a true seeker.
Well, thank you, everybody. So I'm clearly in the presence of greatness. And also, by the way, you've all been put on record. You're a part of this. So anything that happens today, everybody's name is recorded.
Oh, dear.
That's okay.
That's okay. So let me tell you about this project that we're working on. And maybe it would help to start a little bit with the genesis of it. So the idea has been knocking around in my head for well over 10 years. And I would sort of pitch the idea now and then, and people say, that sounds cool, but nothing ever really came of that until 2 years ago. when I was out in Washington, D.C. on a consulting contract working for the World Bank Group. And so I was staying in a bedroom, like an Airbnb bedroom in a house that was on property that George Washington used to own. So I was in Alexandria, Virginia, just a couple of miles from Mount Vernon. And I would drive into DC every day and do my work, and it was project management stuff. And I was there when the lockdowns were initiated. World Bank Group was like a day ahead of everybody else. And so I'm stuck out there. They don't want me to fly home because if I were to go home and then come back when things opened up, I would have to quarantine for 14 days. And so they asked me to stick around. And one of the nights that I was there, I woke up in the middle of the night and I had two thoughts in my head. One was, and this, just hang on to this because we'll explain a little bit more because you may not like what this thought is. But the thought was, we'll never be able to elect enough good people who will be in office long enough to make lasting change. And the second thought was, it's time to start the virtual ward republic program, which is what I had labeled this back then. The ward republics that Thomas Jefferson talked about, but doing it virtually. So the first phone call I made in response to those thoughts was Al Jackson. And so I told Al, I said, this is what happened, this is kind of the beginning of the vision. And he goes, Jeff, he says, I feel exactly like you're right, and this is the time to start that. And so we agreed to assemble a small group of people, and Al reached out to Robin and Andre, and we have a few others, and we formed what we called our council. And we met every week for 6 months trying to figure out what this should look like. Because we don't know what it's supposed to look like now. We can read about Jefferson, but that was agrarian, right? Things were different. So what does it look like now? And so this presentation is kind of the culmination of all of those discussions, as well as some practical experience of having actually been doing this. And so Robin knows every word in this, except I did change one little part. We'll see whether you like it or not. And so this is a result of a collaborative effort. And so
Who all was involved?
So in our little council, we had the Youngs, the Jacksons, me, Lyle and Dixie Bear, and
all the Skousen and the Backies.
And then we expanded it. We included Sue and John Brandt.
They teach. Doesn't he teach at what's the name of his school, his college? Or
I can't remember.
I want to say it's like Liberty University though.
Hillsdale.
It's not Hillsdale. But they're in Virginia, very involved, just super sharp.
And so the group ended up being a group of people who either knew each other or knew people who were inviting people. So it was deliberately kind of a closed group. And one of the things about the group was, we are not about educating. Okay? This is only for people who already understand the principles and want to do something about it. And so that's how it started. And so let me just kind of share with you kind of this presentation as a way to introduce you to what we're doing, and then we'll see where that takes us. So we renamed this effort a couple of times, and now my clicker's not working, so let's see if we can get it going here. So the original name we were going with was Virtual Ward Republics, and that ended up not being the greatest name, and so we came up with liberty republics, and so I'm going to have to do this differently.
There it is.
There, okay, we're going. So liberty republics. And to kind of get us into the mindset of what this is about, I've got a couple graphics here. So we're all aware about the decades of centralization of power in Washington, D.C. I found this graphic. I mean, look at all of those little logos and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Every one of those, you cannot find anywhere in the Constitution authorization for those things. Right?
Merit badges.
Yeah, but they make laws and they can put you in prison and they can enforce fines and they're not elected.
And that's bad enough, but it's worse because now we have all of these multinational companies that are on that same progressive train. And it's worse than that because this is global in scope now. It's not just the United States. It's multinational companies. It's a globalization. It's a merging of businesses and governments. In fact, sometimes I don't even know who's wagging whose tail. And you know, maybe in another forum I can share with you some of the things I learned in some of the webinars that I attended when I was behind the internet at World Bank. And I know this isn't news to you. And we're all experiencing it, we're seeing it, and we're also seeing some of the negative parts of it. But what's happened is we started with this experiment that the founders gave us of self-government and self-reliance, and over the years we have gone from being self-reliant to being dependent on the government, which promises safety and security. And so what that has resulted in is the government's not protecting rights anymore. It's focused on providing things in an equitable way. And so instead of experiencing liberty like the founders gave us, we now experience tyranny. And so, you know, if you were to take a magic wand and somehow return the federal government to its proper bounds, right? However that was done, just pretend it happens, all this stuff would go away. And then we'd be faced with this population of people who have no idea what to do. We do not know how to self-govern. And so you've noticed, I'm sure, that most people's knee-jerk reaction to a problem is, well, the government needs to fix that, or we need a law, or we need to something like that. We don't even think about doing things ourselves anymore. So, pop quiz. What are the first three words of the preamble of the Constitution?
We the people.
Who's the government?
We.
We the people. Who did God give unalienable rights to?
Individuals.
Right? And so it turns out I'm actually in favor of a great reset. But it's a mindset reset because we don't think, act in a way where we actually are we the people. And so it's time to start owning that. Right?
Yep.
Okay, so it turns out that the founders actually knew that what they were giving us would end up facing, you know, catastrophic crisis. And they also knew what to do about it. And so Dr. Skousen, for over a quarter of a century, worked to discover that secret sauce. What is it that the founders knew about government that we could use when we faced this major constitutional crisis? And it turns out that he originally thought that would be pretty easy to do. But it wasn't, because when you read history books, they're usually a commentary on someone else's commentary, on someone else's commentary on history, and so you're not getting history. And so it wasn't until Dr. Skousen got into the actual writings, like journals and correspondence, that he began to discover what their core concepts were. And I have a little video with Dr. Skousen telling us about that.
during these 60 years, we have written 37 books, and this is the last one, almost. And Mother's been my editor and proofreader through all of those. Oh, you can't believe the ordeal, because we redo it and redo it, but anyway. But the interesting thing about this book is that our grandchildren kept saying, Grandpa, you've been dedicating your books to people. When are you going to dedicate a book to me? And various ones would come up and ask, when are you going to dedicate one? I thought, well, I'm going to be in trouble here because I'm not going to write 50 more books with 50 grandchildren. So this one we dedicated to all 50 of our grandchildren. And it shows the order in which they were born, the name of their parents, and this book was to honor them, because the majesty of God's law will probably be practiced during their lifetime. And so we spend a lot of time autographing books to grandchildren and friends. And, 1,150, 1,151, 52, and so forth. But it's been a long time writing. This was a very difficult book to write. President McKay suggested that some lawyers try to undertake to write this book, and so we took it seriously and worked on it for about 27 years. And finally, it was finished this year. Now we have one more to come out, which is also finished but not published, called Prophecy and Modern Times. And that book actually goes with this one, because the prophets knew a lot more than historians did. And so we've included in Prophecy in Modern Times a lot of wonderful things that wasn't exactly appropriate for a secular book, such as this one. As I was doing the Prophecy in Modern Times, which I just finished, I was tremendously impressed with the exciting events which lie just ahead. I don't want to miss any of them, so I take my vitamins regularly. But in the next 40 years or so, a lot of the things Heavenly Father's been telling His prophets for years will come to pass. So I feel the upcoming generation is very blessed that they'll have the opportunity of seeing all these things occur. And while there are some difficult and challenging times, in the end, God wins, and so do all of His people who are righteous. As I do those books, I somehow wish that I could share each one with my children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren as they unfold, as they develop. That's not possible, but at least once it's recorded, they can read them.
Isn't he awesome?
40 years, huh?
And when was that recorded?
25 years ago.
So you can do the math on that, right? So, the majesty of God's law. So I don't know if you've read it. If you haven't, you probably should. Robin and I were talking yesterday, and right now you can't get the majesty of God's law. Apparently they're sold out. And I said, Robin, I have a box of majesty of God law. So I brought a box here. So if anybody wants a book, I paid Harold Skousen $30 a book. So if you want to give me $30, you can have a book. We'll open the box, and you can take one with you. The book Prophecy and Modern Times has been published, but it didn't come out with that title. It's The Cleansing of America.
Oh, okay, I've got that.
Okay.
Right? So there are 6 chapters in the majesty of God's law that are critical for understanding what the roadmap looks like for the future of what we do. And the first chapter in this. And I mean, you should read everything, but those would be like the key chapters to read that will clue you in on what David O. McKay was after when he asked Dr. Skousen to discover what the founders' principles were, and then teach it. So, what the founders discovered was that, and Jefferson talked about the principles of good government. They didn't invent, they discovered them. And so they discovered that in England, after the Romans had left, which is about 400 AD, and the Romans had a system of rulers' law, right? You know, dictator at the top, people were, you know, subject to the ruler. And so when the Romans withdrew from England, it created this power vacuum. And 1,000 little kingdoms rose up in the place, all over, you know, what we now view as England and Scotland. And they were all fighting one another. And some of these kingdoms were small, like, you know, a few families. One of the larger kingdoms that got so tired of beating back the people trying to take over the kingdom invited 2 Anglo-Saxon brother kings to come over with their army and secure his kingdom in exchange for power in the kingdom. So they came over, they secured the kingdom, one of them died, the other got the promised power, and they're kind of looking around and thinking, hey, why don't the rest of the Anglo-Saxons come on over? And that began what we know historically as the Anglo-Saxon invasion of England. What's that?
Anglo-land.
And was it Viking or Danish or what?
They're
Norwegian?
Norwegians. I thought they were like Vikings.
So it's yes to kind of all of that.
Yeah.
So it's not 100% clear exactly who the Anglo-Saxons were back then, but yeah, they came from the northern part of Europe.
It's frozen.
And
England looked like a garden.
But what they brought with them was a people's law system of government. And so the way they organized their kingdoms was the smallest group that was organized was a group of 10 families. And then there was a group of 50 families. And then a group of 100 families. And then a group of 1,000 families. And then there might be multiple groups of thousands of families. And they had all of these traditional laws that we now kind of collectively refer to as Anglo-Saxon common law. One of the interesting things about a king in an Anglo-Saxon kingdom was his powers were limited, except in time of war. Does that sound familiar?
Mm-hmm.
In fact, the Anglo-Saxons eventually conquered the whole of England. And there were all these Anglo-Saxon kingdoms, and they started to consolidate, and they got down to 7 Anglo-Saxon kingdoms, and those 7 kingdoms got together and created a kingdom. So they all combined, and Egbert was the king, and he's known as the first king of England. And the Anglo-Saxon dynasty lasted about 500 years. Until 1066, when William the Conqueror came over, and in a relatively short period of time, he conquered the whole of England and replaced the people's law system of the Anglo-Saxons with ruler's law. And that began the centuries-long effort for the English people to reclaim their rights that for 500 years became part of their DNA when the Anglo-Saxons ruled in England. And you know some of the stories, right? In 1215, or is it 1250? I get them mixed up. When you had the Magna Carta.
1215. No, yeah, 1215.
Is it 1215? So I've seen the Magna Carta. I've been over there in England and saw it. And if you were to read the Magna Carta now, you would think you're reading the Bill of Rights, right? So it really was a discovery of ancient government principles that the founders were involved in. And our pedigree in the United States goes back to the Anglo-Saxons, right? And then also the founders discovered that there was an exact system, this decentralized republic system that the ancient Israelites practiced. In fact, they practiced it before the Anglo-Saxons practiced it.
Oh, yeah.
And so this came about when Moses was out in the wilderness with his little group of people, like 3 million people, right? So it really was a massive exodus. They had all been living under a system of ruler's law, right? The Pharaoh. They're out in the wilderness, they have their problems, and so they would just queue up in front of Moses' tent and have him solve their problems. And, thank goodness Moses had kind of a meddling father-in-law named Jethro who came to see what his now famous son-in-law is up to. And he sees what's going on and he says, this isn't good. You're going to wear yourself out and you're going to wear out your people. And he says, tomorrow I'm going to tell you God's way of gathering and governing. And set up groups of 10 families, 50 families, 100 families, and 1,000 families. So that's part of our pedigree. In fact, some people think that the Anglo-Saxons got their system from the ancient Israelites.
Well, and Robin, we've talked about this before. Didn't they come down from the Black Sea? They think maybe that...
Like the 10 tribes went up. A lot of people say Danish is Dan's land,
Yeah.
So there's a lot of...
They still have remnants of the 12 tribes.
Hmm? Well, we think you're right. The 10 tribes all dispersed.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of... that goes up into England and Scotland, right? And then you see the gathering, even for the church, where it really gathered strongly is something that resonated to the hearts of the people listening.
Yeah.
As you're talking about this, it reminds me of my 50-year-old son. When he was in high school, I don't even remember what he did, but his punishment was he had to listen to all of the Freeman Institute cassettes and finish the workbook. And he said that was the best thing that ever happened to him when he was in government class. His teacher had him teach the class. Wow.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, and just as an aside, you can, for every constitutional conservative of prominence today, you're most likely going to find a connection to Cleon Skousen 40 years ago. It's really amazing what he did. So I was over in England. I was doing one of my project management trainings in the London area, and I stayed a little bit longer, and it turns out that right near the hotel where I was staying was an Anglo-Saxon castle.
Oh, how cool.
And so I went over and I walked around the ruins of this Anglo-Saxon castle and discovered these little signs that said there's an Anglo-Saxon museum. And so I went around the corner and I found that and went through the museum. And they had to kick me out because it closed while I was still there. But one of the things that absolutely shocked me was the Anglo-Saxons were pagans. But I thought about that and realized that this system of decentralized republics works for people who are good people, whether or not your view of God is similar to our view of God. And so this becomes then our pedigree for the system of government that we have. And Thomas Jefferson envisioned the whole of the United States being surveyed into 6 square miles. So 640 acres. And it would support about 100 families. Now this was agrarian in its construct, so the farms would be on the outside and the town square would be in the middle. And he called those wards. And in fact, Congress did do that. They did surveys. You go back east and you could ask somebody where they vote. They might say, well, I vote in ward whatever. So the closest thing we have to that out here in the West is a precinct. And so Jefferson said, my proposition had for a further object, impart these wards those portions of self-government for which they are best qualified. So this is Jefferson's thinking about what a ward republic, approximately 100 families, would take care of. Elementary school, a company of militia with its officers, a justice of the peace and constable. Each ward republic should take care of their own poor. their own roads, their own police, elect within themselves on or more jurors to attend the courts of justice, give in at the folk house, town hall, their votes for functionaries reserved to their election. And notice, this is the writings of Thomas Jefferson. This isn't some, history book. And notice this bottom one, this was from a letter that Jefferson wrote. He said, each ward republic would thus be a small republic within itself, and every man in the state would thus become an acting member of the common government, transacting in person a great portion of its rights and duties entirely within his competence. The wit of man cannot devise a more solid basis for a free, durable, and well-administered republic.
And I love how you're using republic, because nobody uses it anymore. And we are our pledge and to the republic. And so if we could not just get that out to everybody, we're a republic, not a democracy. I think it's so important.
Well, those who own the language can capture the minds of people.
Absolutely.
And so this is deliberate, right?
Yes. Oh, you bet.
So just to drive that point home, so just a little bit of an aside, in Genesis 5:1, we've heard of that, right? Isn't that the Bible or something? Mm-hmm. Genesis 5:1. In the day that God created man, in the likeness of God made he him. Male and female created he them, and blessed them, and called their name Adam. And so when we so that's another word that's been corrupted. If you go back to the beginning, there never was this conflict between men and women. A man was always a male and a female. And when God was finished creating man in his image, there was a male and a female standing there. So that's what God looks like.
Yeah, mankind.
Mankind, yep. So this is...
Man is kind and women are kind. They are kind because gods are kind.
There we go.
Wasn't that understood though? I mean,
Well, obviously not
as a
in our
child, I
scriptures.
understood that. So when they said man,
Right, and that has changed in our lifetime.
Oh, yeah.
And also we're seeing the definition of a marriage change, and all this stuff is deliberate. So what we're doing at Liberty Republics is simply re-implementing self-government. And I looked at the definition to make sure we were in the right direction there. So re-implement means to implement again or differently. So we can't do exactly what Jefferson envisioned, because that's not what life is like today. Doesn't mean the principles are wrong, but it's how we implement them that becomes the issue. So this is our mission statement right here. Organize ward republics across America for the perfect exercise of self-government and for the preservation of our constitutional republic. Become comprehensively prepared for challenging times. Become independent from unconstitutional institutions and programs, and restore the Constitution and the tradition of the Founding Fathers. So how are we organizing at Liberty Republics? 10 family groups, 50 family groups, 100 family groups, and 1,000 family groups. We call our group of 10 families a tithing, because that's what the Anglo-Saxons called them. 50 family groups we call a vil, because that's what the Anglo-Saxons called a group of 50 families.
A village.
We call a group of 100 families a ward, and we tagged onto that republic because there are a lot of LDS people that might be confused, and so it's a ward republic. And then a group of 1,000 families is called a shire. And you go back and you read English history, and these names all mean something. And a vil is smaller than a shire, and it all means something to them. We're not plugged into that. But what we're doing has nothing to do with like replacing our existing government. We're not doing anything. All we're doing is we're organizing to self-govern, but still within the context of having cities and counties, states, and our federal government. And there's no money involved. We're using the King Benjamin model, so everybody serves. We take care of our own needs and we serve. And so we have come up with what we call our 3 main objectives. So self-government, we are discovering how to self-govern by doing it and helping others do it. So we're figuring it out as we go because nobody really knows right now what it exactly needs to look like. Self-reliance, so we're becoming comprehensively prepared for an extended period of time. And constitution restoration, we are actively involved in restoring adherence to the Constitution and the tradition of the Founding Fathers. And Robin, that's my little change right there.
According to the Founding Fathers?
No,
What
the
happened?
adherence part. So we talk about restoring the Constitution, so we can dust it off, we can pass a couple amendments, fix it up, and restore it. That doesn't do us any good. We have to restore adherence to the Constitution in the
right.
tradition of the Founding Fathers, right?
So
we already
we
have the
follow it.
Constitution.
But they aren't following it.
Yeah,
Right, it's been discarded.
correct.
And the agencies, that's what I found out, 2 things. The agencies don't necessarily have to follow it, right? Your legislatures, and the other way that they're getting around it, CIA and other governments don't have to follow it. So what they can do is they could say to somebody in England, can you investigate this private citizen? Because we're not really supposed to. Or could you target, they were saying the gal on TikTok, did you guys see that? Libs for TikTok?
Yeah.
But what they did is they had the German government research and then attacked on a private citizen. But our government cannot do that. But do you see how globalists are using it against us? So the adherence, has
Well,
to
and
change.
then, this whole global, we want to become global, it really crushes our Constitution. Because they don't have to adhere.
Yeah, it's a mess.
So when it comes to self-government, to flesh it out a little bit, we're discovering how to self-govern by doing it and helping others do it. And what that really looks like in practicality is doing the best we can to withdraw from all of the unconstitutional things and replace them with self-government solutions. In areas, so withdraw and become independent from unconstitutional government-controlled institutions, programs, and industries, and join or create self-government replacement solutions in areas like education, healthcare, commerce, retirement, news, and entertainment.
What is retirement? What do you mean?
Well, right now we have an unconstitutional system we call Social Security. We need to have retirement, so we need to have self-government solutions for that.
So, moving out of it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Withdrawing from, replacing it with a self-government solution.
Can I ask, would it be, this, just haven't been thinking about it, but with education, each family of 10, was it, or 100? Because it's a city.
Well, Jefferson's view was at 100 family level, you could have an elementary school.
As an elementary school. But if you had 100 families, you could take care of the poor, the destitute, and probably you're retired, you're aged, right? So there's help. And all people can do something, everybody can do something. But that way, I think that's where your retirement would take care of too. It's within that, so everybody is motivated to do as much as they can, right? Because it's not just put on some far off printing press that they'll take care of me. And then when the printing press breaks, everybody looks around like, oh, what do we do?
Right, so she's sharing kind of the vision of, okay, we figure it out on our own. Do we do elementary school at a ward republic level? Maybe we do it differently. We don't know. We're figuring out how to do it.
I think there's a lot of people trying to figure out the homeschooling situation, right? Because some are like, oh, I don't know, I can't do it. But I talked to Bob Lee's son, who graduated from Hillsdale. And Hillsdale is now putting out a K through 12 curriculum based on the 1776 project, which is a friend, it's, what's his name, Ward, but Trump had said, we need something to counter this woke 1691 project, and had all of these scholars come together. Bill Woodward was one, He's been over at Al Jackson's, and I mean, this is a beautiful program that goes to your original documents, founding fathers, you know, and builds from them. And so,
The Daily Wire's doing kids stuff too.
And
It's
isn't Ron
kids-
Paul doing, or Ron Paul doing?
well, I'm just saying, there's lots of them. So a community,
So that
once
you
they
have the
could find a
resource.
solid one, then you could work together and put together something like that.
Yeah.
So
Or a family could choose to do it
yeah,
on their own.
American
I mean, it's
Heritage
just
is
up to
doing a
whatever they
great
want.
job, right? There's
Isn't
different
Go ahead
things.
first.
I mean, isn't there also a healthcare program out there, because my kids were using it for a while, where it's everybody, it's a Christian thing where.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
it's the
Yes.
Amish, oh,
Yes.
okay, so. people are
MediShare
trying
and
to
Liberty
do-
Health
Yeah.
Share are two of them.
Yeah, Liberty Health Share I had for years. They're horrible at paying their bills.
They
though.
are.
They're horrible,
Yeah, so there are problems with that.
yeah.
But we're going to figure out solutions
Yeah.
because that's what we're doing. So the idea then is to progressively reduce reliance on government. You know, one way to restore adherence to the Constitution and the tradition of the founding fathers is to not need the government anymore,
Right.
right?
Just for security.
So we're free to meet our needs and solve our own problems without government interference. So self-reliance, we're becoming comprehensively prepared for an extended period of time in areas such as food, water, clothing, medication, money, communication, and energy and utilities. And as Robin was pointing out earlier, eliminate single points of failure. Because as Robin was pointing out, we can get derailed and not be free to pursue self-government if we can't take care of things like that. Right?
Can I
And
make a comment?
what's that?
Can I make a comment?
Oh, please.
At the county convention 2 weeks ago, Marlo Oakes, who's the treasurer of Utah, stood up there and told us, he said, "Are you aware that the federal government is putting the state of Utah under an ESG score? And they have told us that there are certain things that we are doing that they do not approve of." The one that stood out to me was, he said, Utah has too many cattle farmers, and if you want our funds, you're gonna have to get rid of your cattle farming. And he said to all of us, he goes, "You know what this means, don't you?" He goes, "This is the opportunity for us to say, no more federal funds. We don't want them. Keep your ESG score." And he said, "But how many in Utah will agree with that?" Now, he was speaking to Utah County. We probably would, with Salt Lake County. But we are at that crossroads where we could break away, but will we?
Yeah, and to add on to what you're saying, to further emphasize how dire our situation is, I went on to the World Economic Forum website and poked around about ESG and drilled down and discovered that ESG has been a project that has been being worked on for 11 years.
What is ESG?
E stands for environment, S stands for social, and G stands for governance. And it's a scoring method that separates a person's ability to borrow money or a company's ability to borrow money based on their financial worthiness by whether or not they're in line with the elite's agenda, which is articulated in the 2030 agenda, the 17 sustainable goals, and you can go read about that on the World Economic Forum website. You will agree with every one of them. What you don't agree with is how they're going about doing it. It's at the expense of liberty. So my point is, building on what you said, is that the rails have been laid for a long time. And so now that we're hearing about it, it feels like it's new, but it's in place. It is solid. And it is a thing, and it's going to be more of a thing going forward. We can't stop it. Okay, we can't. Nancy?
I went through this process with someone that used to work for the global elites for a long time, but he had a list of 20 of these areas, like you're saying, the communications, the child care, all of those things, but he suggested that there's presidencies in each one, so there's 3 different people in each of those areas that kind of head up the committees, that it works, pretty smoothly. To, people that have expertise in those areas and that they're covered, and then they can delegate and people can fit in. wherever, but I thought that was a really good
So
suggestion.
on the World Economic Forum website, there is a tool that they call their strategic wheel. It's just a strategic intelligence wheel. And you can drill down like what Nancy is talking about until you see who owns that piece of this overall strategy. It's a brilliant tool, but it'll scare the bejesus out of you because it's so connected and well organized. It's
So
very,
sophisticated.
it's very mature.
Yeah.
Does Soros lead one of these wheels?
I haven't seen his name on it, but doesn't mean it's not. To wrap up the three objectives, so Constitution restoration, are actively involved in restoring adherence to the Constitution of the Founding Fathers. So that looks like returning the federal government to its proper role as defined in the Constitution, assisting states, counties, and cities to withdraw from unconstitutional programs and regulations, right? What we were just talking about. Now, how awesome would it be if we could get Utah to roll, right? To basically say, we're not going to take any more federal dollars. We're going to reclaim the unconstitutionally held land, and we're going to exempt ourselves from all of these federal regulations. Well,
Because they're unconstitutional federal regulations.
Exactly.
We should be able to say, cut the head off the snake. I always thought if we have 3 million people, that's what the people were back at the time of the revolution.
Moses.
Utah is set up, if we would awaken, it
Yeah.
would only take, what is it, 6% of the people is what it took at the revolution? Only 3%.
3%.
3%, that's
3%.
300,000 people, is that right? In Utah,
Yeah.
we'd have to move 300,000 people.
Yeah, we've got to do a lot of changing. We've got Cox for a governor and Mitt Romney for a senator.
Yeah.
And they're not doing this stuff.
No.
Well,
They
they,
have no intention of doing
Williamsburg
this
had a wicked governor. Right?
Well,
He was a Tory.
the state of liberty in Utah is really bad.
Yes.
And we can talk about this another time or later, but it's all deliberate, and our heads explode. We go to delegates, vet candidates, we go to conventions, we nominate people. They swear that they're going to adhere to the party platform, and if you read that, it's brilliant. Both the Utah County, which I'm familiar with, and the state Republican platform, brilliant. But then these people who get elected, they ignore it.
They don't even know it.
Oh, they know it. They end up lying about it. Is what happens. And
Some of both.
and who's the government?
We the people.
We the people. And we have let this happen.
Yeah.
So we have to have a mindset reset and start behaving like we actually really are the government. We're joining with others. It's not like we have our movement that we're doing, because we're just about organizing and creating the leadership necessary so that we can withstand the crises that are going to come by a system of decentralized republics like the Anglo-Saxons and the ancient Israelites. So we join with others, and we're about decentralizing, and this is about limited delegated powers to protect rights and defend liberty, unlike what we have now. So I mean, every time Biden says something, and if you can understand him, does it have anything to do with the Constitution? Ever?
Never.
Does it have anything to do with anything that the national government should be involved with? Never. Right? So, what does a tithing do? A group of 10 families. Well, it's really simple. So member family groups assist each other to set and achieve goals within each of those 3 Liberty Republic objectives. That's all it is. And so we started for 1 year, we had a prototype tithing. And we met every week. And it was, okay, what does a tithing look like? What does it do? And so we figured out enough so that we could have annual elections, and we have 3 tithings now. We have 2 that really need to be split. Yours needs to be split, and John and Sue's need to be split.
In Virginia.
Out in Virginia. And we've organized our first bill, right? And so we're also now trying to figure out, what does a bill look like? right? And so probably in September when we have our annual elections, we'll organize our first ward republic and we'll start figuring out what that looks like. And we'll just keep doing it. And it's everybody that's involved working together to discover how to self-govern by doing it and helping others do it. It's that simple.
It seems like if you want the least restrictive situation, you're gonna get further from Washington. Your least restrictive is in your groups of 10.
Yeah.
When you need more, you go to your groups of 50, but the more further out you go, you become more restrictive. But we are in a mind frame that, oh, we need them to help us.
Exactly. We've been subjugated. There's no other way to describe what's happened over time. Now, you know, to be fair, you know, probably the main thing that a tithing does is focus on self-reliance, right? Because that's how we can help each other. A tithing isn't going to be able to stand up a school or stand up a hospital or things like that. But groups of tithings can do that. And so the way we're addressing these, you know, coming up with self-government solutions is we're organizing committees. And so we have a commerce committee. And our commerce committee has a solution where if you want, you can buy and sell anything for gold and silver without ever touching the world banking, central banking fiat system that exists right now. And in fact, the man who is kind of driving that is Larry Hilton. Larry Hilton is the one who engineered the Utah Legal Tender Act and started the organization called UPMA, United Precious Metals Association. And when I met with Larry, I sold him a Majesty of God's Loft for gold. And that gold is still sitting in my UPMA account. I'm just looking for more merchants that I can buy stuff from. But the vision's there, right? You could completely withdraw from the fiat system and eventually buy houses, cars, clothing, food, etc., all with gold and silver. And the technology is there. It's a little bit clunky right now, but it's there. You can do it.
Can I just say, on Friday at UVU, this is the first Bitcoin blockchain conference that's ever been sponsored by a university. And on Friday, they just open it up for free instead of $29. So you just buy your own lunch and stuff, but it's a free event and they have some things there that are very educational for, you know, getting off the grid and, you know, the blockchain and stuff like that.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thanks, Nancy. So we have an education committee. What that looks like mostly now is creating a resource list of existing solutions that a family or a group of families could use to get their kids and grandkids out of the government indoctrination schools. We have eyes on doing a healthcare committee. You know, if you marry the commerce system and healthcare, you circumnavigate all of the controls that you have at the national level. Why couldn't you have concierge doctors and midwives and dentists and things like that, and you pay them with gold and silver? And you can organize private membership associations where you work in the private space and not in commerce, and the government has no authority to come in and look at what you're doing, what you're paying for, or levy taxes.
So are you saying that everybody will have gold and silver? Where are they getting gold and silver? If that's what you're using to.
Well, eventually, like if the dollar collapses, you end up with commodities. So it's either a barter system, and that's really, as King Dollar is getting dethroned, what they're really looking at in government is they're saying, well, Russia has oil. They'll use oil as their back commerce, right? Because the dollar is no longer your trade. And other countries will use whatever products. If they have uranium, they have whatever there is. It will be based on, what do you call those? Commodities. So if you have chickens, your commodities become eggs. But the common one would be like, you know, I'd say probably if we buy silver now, it's a decent price. But, you know, as the dollar, the inflation is going up, you're losing 15% a year just in your dollar. So probably safer to buy some hard commodities. Or if you want to store grain or whatever your commodity is that you would want to, you know, you're gonna be replicating chickens or something.
Coffee and tobacco. would be
Coffee,
good.
tobacco, but, you know, it's like,
Whiskey.
maybe you teach
Cigarettes.
at school or you do for whatever they're going to share.
So in the Constitution, states are authorized to create or to have gold and silver be legal tender. So we'll be doing other things, I'm sure. But right now, what that looks like is if you go and you open up a UPMA account, you can buy gold using your fiat dollars, and it goes into your gold account. And it can be physical gold that's stored in vaults. You can take gold that you have and go down to their office in Alpine, brick and mortar location with the bulletproof windows, and slide the drawer out and put your gold in there if you want. Or you can go down there and get gold backs and silver backs if you want to use those, if you want to give those to merchants that are willing to accept it. And they're busy doing things to elaborate this, make it better and better and better. And so, I mean, it really now is something that we ought to consider jumping on. So we have a self-reliance committee, we have a constitution restoration committee, that's Al's committee, by the way, and we have a membership committee. And, you know, we don't have tons of people, and we're looking for more tithings to be organized and people who express an interest and will help, you know, by joining one of these committees and helping advance those. We have a designation that we call affiliated organizations. So these are entities who know us, have vetted us, and have agreed that they want to be affiliated with our effort. And then on our end, that we feel comfortable referring people to for whatever it is. So right now, the United Precious Metals Association is one of our affiliated organizations. The Thomas Jefferson Center for Constitutional Restoration, the Kimber Academy, American Center for Civic Training. So that's one of our tithing members, one of our members of Liberty Republic, has organized a center, if you will, where people can go and get trained on how to be effective in government, you know, from a constitutional point of view. Healing of America Foundation, which is a 501c3. So it's a way to donate money that's tax deductible to promote education programs about how to heal America. And then we have our sights on some other organizations like the Front Sight Firearms Training Institute. So did you notice, Robin?
Yeah, everybody noticed, I think, that he's carrying, right?
That's a pretty big clicker
And you
holder.
trust me with this, right?
Yeah, we took a class. We went down there together and learned to shoot, how to load, how to do all the stuff.
So Robin and I and some other members of our Liberty Republics went through a defensive handgun training course at Front Sight Firearms Training
Are
Institute.
they still in Nevada?
Yeah, Pahrump, Nevada.
There's a local guy that is fabulous. that
Yeah.
you
So-
guys- that-
They have the Utah Polite Society here.
Yeah, and so it's not the only solution, but the point is that Second Amendment, right?
Right.
So you look at me, you know what my stance is on the Second Amendment, right? Now you look at me, you don't know what my stance is on the 10th Amendment or the 4th Amendment or the First Amendment. That's a little bit harder to define, but at least you know where I stand on the Second Amendment. And Robin could carry her gun around too. I would trust her because she knows what to do.
I need to practice more.
Yeah, we all need to practice.
I have a list of about 40 groups nationwide that I could give you guys.
Excellent, thank you, Nancy. So we've got Convention of States. So our tithing captain in Virginia is affiliated with them.
Is there really a push to have a con-con?
Oh yeah.
Good.
I don't know what the count is right now, but they keep track of how many states have.
Because that's a way to heal it.
Yeah.
If we could have a convention of the states, a new convention, like they
You have to
had.
have enough like-minded people,
Yes.
right?
Otherwise it could go south.
Yeah, and right now, if you just look at who's running anything,
Oh,
like
yeah.
you don't know if you can trust them.
Yeah.
So if anybody's worried about what you hear about resistance of having a Article 5 convention,
Yes.
you can talk to me. I can persuade you that there's no problem with that.
I agree with you.
So there's no chance that it can be a runaway convention.
Yeah. Do we have a George Washington to lead it?
No.
That's
But we got a Robin.
She's great.
We got this group.
No, he's just saying if we get enough people that are plugged in, right, that are awake.
Hillsdale College, Moms for America, that's Julene. And there are others.
What did you say, the Ron Paul Institute?
Ron Paul is.
I'm a fan.
Yeah, Ron Paul is awesome. So, call to action. How do you join? Well, number one is you're invited. And you are invited. The next is meet the eligibility requirements. I'm sure you all meet them. But it's for like-minded people, and we're not about educating. You have to come join us after you're educated. And then sign the Liberty Republic Compact. So borrowing from the Mayflower Compact approach, everybody gets to sign a compact and say we're in.
Well, that's real hard.
And pay your money. Oh wait, there is no money.
And that's the step
blood.
2 is really, you want to tell them some of the requirements, because that's where you think, oh, I could invite this person or that person, but they really, you have to kind of vet
They
them.
have to,
Yeah.
they have to be
Or you can,
intelligent on
they might think they do and just say, well, you might want to read, have you read the
5,000
5,000
Year
Year
Lead.
Lead?
Right.
Or are you familiar with these sections of the Majesty of God's Law? Like, I think Marilyn was saying, Robin, I got it, I'm reading from the front. I'm like, let's go to the back. You just need these chapters.
My book starts in the front. I have an older, I
Yeah.
bought the book,
There's a couple.
12
But-
years ago.
But the
They've
part,
reprinted it differently.
Which chapter?
The
Because my book's
last
different.
6 chapters.
Mine are in the front.
No, they're still in the back.
Oh, okay.
So
The Anglo-Saxon is all the back. I love the Anglo-Saxons.
so you're right that the chapters were reorganized,
Yeah.
but the last 6 chapters in either printing edition are the ones to read.
Okay.
yeah,
And-
I read them a few times. I can do it
it's
again.
really, it's like, let's see, America's Manifest Destiny, the founders, principles, eventually the people must organize in God's own way. And then, but those are, in some books, they're like chapter 25 through 30, and in another printing, it's chapter 27 through 36. So they are the last bits. It's the statutes, and that's not as important as how you organize. So you can download it, you can get it, as an ebook and read it. It's inexpensive. Or you could buy a book
Well, he's
because
got
we have
the books here, yeah.
accessibility to them. And I think we'll go through these then with our classes. Maybe we can just go through. That'll be very helpful. And then we can really get people started. So Jeff, do you want to finish that? And then, because I'm wondering what time we have here.
We're doing okay.
Are we okay?
So we're getting close to 11:30, so we're basically finished here. So if anybody wants to buy a book, you can do it. I just want $30 for each book. And then I'm going to turn the time over to Robin. And if you are interested in joining Liberty Republics, maybe we just create a tithing here and let Robin and I coach you on how to do it, have an election, and get busy. We have artifacts. We have, suggested agendas and things like that.
I'm just wondering, how do you do it so that I'm trying to visualize how you could do it with people so that in your area, like you can't drive places, you may not have communication. So you gotta get more local by you, don't you?
Nope. So we're going to leverage technology. So it's going to be virtual. Eventually it will be geographical, but right now we can do it virtual. So when we did split up tithings, we did kind of do it a little bit geographically. So everybody that's out on the East Coast, they're in their tithing. But when we had our first tithing, it was all virtual, and we just used Zoom meetings
Okay, just to get started,
to
get
do that.
organized.
Yeah. And then out in Virginia, they do a combination of that. So those that are close enough to the branch house, they'll meet together, and then others will join via Zoom, kind of like what we're doing here. But it's more interactive, so it's not just a display, it's a meeting where everybody can, talk to each other.
I was just wondering how you do that.
Well, I think it's exciting to see that one of your possible affiliated organizations is Hillsdale College, and that Bill Lee's son, Josh, is involved with bringing that kindergarten through 12th grade program here in
Yeah.
Utah.
Yeah, so Hillsdale fits in a couple of ways, so the education part as well as the Constitution part. And we're agnostic when it comes to where you get your constitutional education. We don't care.
Hillsdale offers free classes
They
online.
do.
that you
Oh,
can
yeah,
take.
they've got great classes.
And they're great. What we're after is you just meet the baseline requirements so that we're not bringing on people that we have to educate, but rather we're bringing on people who are ready to start discovering how to do self-government.
I have a question that was in your past. It was about the gold. So if you have a 401k and you want to transfer it to gold, is that a step you can take in your program?
You can do that.
And
But let's be clear about this though, because the UPMA and the commerce approach is not about saving gold. It's not about a hedge against inflation. It's about using gold and silver to transact. And because that's the primary purpose of it, unlike a 401, we're exempt from all of the SEC rules because it's not about investing, it's about using legal tender. Gold and silver is legal tender. So it's a little bit different, but yes, could you do that? Yes, you can do
but somebody could coach
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
in this program.
that. Yeah. I mean, Larry Hilton, guy who's started all of this, is the head of our Commerce Committee. And I'm on their Board of Trustees and on the Executive Committee, so even I can help. So, any other questions?
Well, I'm thinking we have kind of documents and papers that you can look at it, and he's given you an overview. There are some specifics, and it would give you what would you want to look for, because I think as we would spread out, once you understand the concept, you get the PowerPoint, you can explain it to someone, or you can have Jeff or myself explain it to someone. But then you would go down to your requirements, and as you're looking for people, you'd say, but have you ever thought about this? Because a lot of people, and especially when things go south, everybody's just going to be kind of looking like, where do I go? Where do I go? So you really want to start setting up your network of people that you can work for. Because I think each one of us would feel comfortable calling and say, do you have a contact for this, or I need that, or right? But if you didn't know, you wouldn't. We all have food storage. We all have, medical things. We all have. But if it was out there for everybody, you would have everybody come over to your house to use up everything you have. So you have to be able to have your little lifeboat, and everybody has to have their little lifeboat to work together, because we don't know when things will fall apart. We might still have quite a long period of time, but we have to be rebuilding this awareness so that when and if and when
We lay in our tracks and train.
we lay our tracks and train, because the Lord says at the end, the wicked will destroy the wicked. We just want to get out of their way, right? We don't want to go down with the Titanic. That's what you're really trying to do.
Yeah, I know this is kind of a bad word nowadays, but what we want to do is immunize ourselves against all of that stuff.
Yeah.
I have another question. So I'm a state delegate. So yesterday I was chatting with a gentleman who's also a state delegate that I thought had my same perception of things. And so we were talking, and I said I'm leaning towards this gentleman because he's more of a republic. And he said, well, we're not a republic, we're a democratic republic. And I thought, I didn't have the answer. So, because I thought, no, we're not, we're a republic. But are we? See, then I started questioning.
Well, we are a democratic
Are we?
republic.
So,
But I questioned that.
a couple of labels that would be accurate to modify the republic part would be a democratic republic or a constitutional republic. So the concept is that we are not a democracy. Do we have any democratic things that we do? Like, yes, everybody gets to vote. That's a democracy. But a democracy is two wolves and a sheep voting on what to have for dinner. Right? So there's no protection of individual rights in a democracy. So the founders stayed away from that. They wanted participation in a decentralized Republican way, which we've just talked about here. And at those local levels, it's very democratic. Everybody's involved, you're local, and you do that.
But you have representatives that you vote for, and then they take care of.
Yeah, so like my head explodes when, you know, people say we need to elect our leaders, and I'm like, no, we're not electing our leaders, we're electing our representatives.
Right.
It's our government, we're the government. You're not our
That are
leaders.
following our platform
That's
that
right.
we've agreed to,
And
not the way they feel about things.
right.
They're supposed to vote according to that platform. That's why people just, smoke comes out
And
of
so
their
that's
ears.
a democratic republic, somewhat.
If they represent.
Yeah, they'll go and represent what the wishes of the people.
Yeah.
So, we don't know, you know, from what you said more about that individual's understanding, but democratic republic is okay. But to say we are a republic without any qualifiers is also
I
accurate.
felt uneducated, so I didn't know how to respond, so thank you. So then I have another question. So then I said, well, we talked about the two candidates, and I said, okay, well, this candidate tends to vote moderately. And he said, well, I think I'm gonna vote for him because he has more status. And if we put in somebody that's Republic, they won't have the status. So he's got the status, can make the, whatever, you know.
Get stuff done.
Yes.
I'm sick to death of that
That's
thinking.
what I responded.
I'm sick to death of, we need to have a big tent so everybody can be in it. No, everybody's welcome, absolutely everybody. But they gotta believe what the platform is. We're not gonna change the platform, right? And there was an attempt at the last Utah County Republican Central Committee meeting to change the platform to say that a family is what is legally defined. By, you know, instead of a man and a woman, a husband and a wife. And I was there, I was precinct chair, and so I was there. And so but see, here's the thing, it's never going to end,
Yes.
right? And, you know, some of us probably remember when Ronald Reagan was elected. Do you remember how that felt? It was like we finally are getting our country back. You had Jerry Falwell in the Moral Majority. You had Phyllis Schlafly in the Eagle Forum. I mean, it looked like we were back. Did that last?
No.
You know, and then you probably remember Newt Gingrich and the contract with America. Remember that? You even had the President of the United States saying, the era of big government is over. That was Bill Clinton.
Wow.
Did that last?
Never happened.
And you had Donald Trump, who was elected, who was pretty disruptive, and he was doing a lot of good things. Certainly not a pure constitutionalist, but compared to the alternative, right?
Or Hillary.
And he kept his campaign promises. You know, when it came to the Middle East and the embassy in Israel.
Israel, yeah.
And he kept his promise of getting rid of 7 or 8 regulations for every new regulation. So a lot of good there. And there was so much good that it was not possible for him to be reelected. And we now see proof that if they want something, they can get something. Right? And so even that didn't last.
Lie, cheat, and steal.
And so we will never be able to elect enough good people who will be in office long enough to make lasting change. What we have to do is we just have to start behaving like we are the government and solve our own problems, re-implement self-government, and then all of these unconstitutional things become irrelevant to us. And then we'll eventually get the Constitution restored and back where it needs to be, and our rights will be protected by government, and we'll be good.
Well, we go back to Joseph Smith and what he saw with the splitting up of the factions and the gangs, and America would be split up, but it would take the boys of the mountains to restore order. But it's like we have to do it now because we are way behind.
We
We'll
already
take the mothers of the boys of the mountains to teach, like, right? They were taught by their mothers. Is that,
The priesthood with the women,
yeah.
you know?
I think they have to step up, and that's what President Nelson's been saying, fill the measure of your creation. Step into it, ladies. We've got to take responsibility because it's falling through our fingers. And the moral, right? Everybody says, oh, you can be a libertarian, you can do whatever you want, nothing matters. But you don't get society without a moral protection for the women and the children and the elderly, right? You just don't throw them away. And
Why should we try to institutionalize God? I mean, he institutionalized the Constitution. Why won't there be a millennium Constitution? I believe there will be.
yeah.
Absolutely.
So
Maybe
remember the
these
video
people-
with Dr. Skousen, and he said, in 1996, my kids and grandkids will probably be living under this, right? Probably within the next 40 years. But he also said it's all good news at the end, right? So we already know what the outcome is. There'll be too many people that will be inactive in the effort because they already know what the outcome is. And so it's going to take a core group of people, which Skousen refers to as the remnant, and you read those last 6 chapters, who will urgently be on this. And when people ask me, do we have enough time to do this? What's the answer?
We have
Yes, of course we have enough time. The only question is, how bad does it get before enough people wake up that we can make the change?
Well, this was clear, like in 1992, I had him come up to Washington State because I started a Ben Franklin Academy up there. And he had Glenn Kimber with him, and they talked, he said, it would be dumb to stand, and this is way back then, it would be dumb to stand in front of a oncoming train that had so much money and power behind it to try to stop that train. He said, what we're doing is building new tracks. And that was with George Wythe College and all this leadership, and I think that's, and if there's lots of other tracks, they can't take one out, or all of them.
So, back to a call to action. So what we could do, and we can modify this, we're just talking out loud here. We could email everybody a compact and the eligibility requirements.
oh, that's good.
And,
Cool.
and
Say that
then-
again?
So what we
Missed it.
want to do moving forward for the group, and he said we could email everybody kind of the eligibility contract, like list, like do you fill? And then we know each other, right? So
Yeah.
it's like yes. And then the compact, would you like to join? And then kind of get it started so that then each one of you know how to eventually get one
But we'd
started
like
because
to
we'll
just
kind of
as
build
a-
around you.
Our
Once you
group
have your
be
training,
our
then what happens?
ward.
So what do you do?
Or our-
If
So-
I join, what am I doing?
I think then what we do next is, so we'll send these out, and everybody that would like to be part of Liberty Republics will meet somewhere, here, my house somewhere, and we'll actually have an election and elect a captain for a new tithing, and then tithing's off and running.
And then there's lists, like everybody has their list, kind of just go through your checklist. Do you have like some supplies for like 6 months? If all of a sudden you had to, for a time period. If you don't, it doesn't mean you can't. It just means start to gather that up for your lifeboat, right? So those kind of things. And then
We're working on self-reliance.
yeah, self-reliance, we're working on that. And then you'll learn about the different committees and think about commerce, okay? If we had to have trade, if all of a sudden our dollar was like Venezuela, what would I do? What would I use? So we don't know that, we might have a long time, but maybe you would think, oh, well, I have a skill set, I could do X, Y, and Z. People would pay me for it, I could fill teeth, I could dig ditches, I could do whatever. You know what I mean? It's just that self-reliance. So those are the things that we have in place and that you can look at, and it just starts to get a group working together to be aware of what you need to become self-reliant. Does that make sense? Okay.
And we're discovering it as we do it, so we don't know exactly what it's all going to look like. It's all voluntary. And, we have a tithing member, Kimball, Randy and his wife, who have a bunch of acres out in Carbon County, and they envision having what they call Liberty Farms, where a tithing could own a farm. And they wouldn't have to work the farm, but they could go there, they would have their land, but somebody would work the farm and you'd get your produce and your protein from that farm that your tithing collectively owns.
And he also has a skill set that he can help you if you wanted to grow lettuce in your garage, you know, if you wanted microgreens, he can show you how to set up those systems and maybe, or he's the one that I went out and he showed me how you do the quail. And there's like a little dresser, it looks like a little dresser, but the quail replicate so quickly and they lay eggs. So yes, they're little eggs, but you have a meat source that's little, like one little package is, you know, and you have the eggs that are perpetual, so you could change or do whatever. So he just has some great little systems in place, and he's another one that would be great to give a class or a lesson. Isn't that fun?
So, and then you'll bring things to it, and so collectively we will be discovering how to do this, and we can kind of all
You'll
go,
have your own ideas.
Yeah.
We'll build on, you know, everybody's innovative.
So I'm thinking that does, I mean, now it's, we can do farther away from it because we don't all live,
Yeah.
but eventually we may not be able to go to these places.
Yes.
So we need to get more people that are close to us involved. But, and that's why I was saying, I thought wards and states were supposed to kind of be this mindset.
They
Well-
were,
They're not.
but they are not now, right?
And so
There
it
was
would
a
be
push
great
for
if
a
you could
while.
get more people that live close to you to be able to do some of these things. So
Yes.
that you don't have to be searching so far away when you
But
can't.
if you need to have a dentist,
Right.
right, there might be a great dentist XYZ, and he's willing to.
There's a dentist that lives around the corner from me, but.
And there's a lot of teachers that didn't want to be teaching this in school, and they're retiring. There's doctors that they're retiring, nurses. They're like, we don't want to do this. There's pilots. There's, you know what I mean? There's more people than you know that would like an option if they could have enough concierge type people using their services. Heck, they would love that.
And this is kind of off the subject a little bit, but my dad was a dentist, and he would bring he built this little thing that was a generator kind of thing. So he laid people on the kitchen table, and he could work on them with this little generator. And so I thought, if you could teach some, you know, like this dentist in our word, have you thought about getting a generator? So that,
Yeah.
and I'm talking, it was not a fancy generator, it was just something that he could run to do dental work when there isn't power around to do
Yeah,
something.
we don't know what this is looking like, but we live in a state where people, through their scriptures, through their education, they know that there's kind of this end time. I mean, my kids hate it because they're like, everybody's thinking end times, you know, I gotta live through this. But luckily, our patriarchal blessings for a lot of our children say that they will go through hard times, but life continues. It is not the end and everything goes away. Even if the millennium began, it still goes for 1,000 years, right? And so those people that are in their little sloops, their little boats off the sinking Titanic, who moved the cheese? We just moved. We did something differently.
Well,
So-
remember Julie Rose says, plant the cherry tree. Stop,
Yeah.
you know, you gotta get out of that fear.
Yeah.
So let me address your thing about LDS wards and things like that. So Dr. Skousen in that video gives it really short shrift about, you know, President McKay talking to him. He fleshes it out even a little bit more in the beginning of the book. But I've heard him tell the story. He was called into President McKay's office and was given the assignment to do this. The assignment, the manifestation of that assignment being completed is the majesty of God's law. And the call was so direct that while he was there, Cleon Skousen asked President McKay when he was going to be called and set apart. And he said, you have misunderstood. While this is a calling, it has to be done outside of the church. So that doesn't mean that there can't be coordination and cooperation, and who knows what happens down the road. But there's no way out in Virginia you could even have a church structure be doing this anyway, right? The only possibility of this might be Utah County. And even that's a stretch.
Yeah, it's a stretch.
So, so all of this, you know, it's completely agnostic when it comes to religion, other than Benjamin Franklin's description of what the universal, you know, religion looks like.
Creed, yeah.
What's that?
The creed, his creed for religion.
Yeah. And so we don't care what faith somebody has. We're focused on these principles, these concepts, decentralized Republican system, and that's what we're after.
When my husband and I first moved here 8 years ago, we were called immediately to work in the home storage center, and we did that for 4 years. And one time when someone from Welfare Square came to inspect to make sure everything was the way it should be, I asked him, does the church have any idea how many members are prepared, have storage, are prepared? And he said at the most 12 to 13%. Is everybody in here?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
That doesn't surprise me.
Well, we went through prepper mode here about 4 years ago. We got our tents, our stoves, our generators, our food.
So let's, Robin, how about this?
Yes.
So
I
you
got that
send
prepper
out
mode.
the eligibility requirements and the compact to anybody that wants
Colette,
it.
and you can distribute.
And
But
then
I'm
let's,
wondering-
We don't want to send it to all sisters.
No. We might want to send it to those that are here. Is
Yeah.
that what we want to do?
so you
We'll
need to
check
figure
on
that
this.
out.
I'm not on her list.
Okay.
And then we'll have an organizing meeting down the road in a couple of weeks or in a month or whatever it is. And we'll stand up 1 or 2 tithings right there on the fly.
I have a question. So Robin
Yeah.
got invited to one of these groups? Is that what I'm understanding?
Oh, you weren't here from the very beginning. So
She's helped start.
I'm just kind of one in the capsule of the kind of the beginnings. Is he kind of
He's the
had
baby.
a spiritual
He
experience?
started it.
He talked to Al. Al said, "I think you need to talk to Robin." And then so we've been kind of working on like what.
Well, you
how we
brought
do
this up to me, what, 2 years ago? You remember
Well,
you gave
it's
me a
not
little
been.
pamphlet a
I
year
don't know.
ago?
It's been a year and a half.
Year
We've
ago?
been working on this.
Yeah.
We
You
had
told
our
me it's
first
coming.
council meetings in March of 2020.
There you go.
Yeah.
That's what I brought up to you.
Yeah.
Because I knew I would eventually bring it here, but it wasn't kind of fleshed out well enough. And so
You were working on it.
yeah, that's what we've been working on. But
Is that
That's Fort
Sonic
Williams.
Booms?
what in
Is
the
that
world
Sonic
this?
Booms?
It's that.
No, they're doing
Military
explosions
base.
and stuff.
Oh, over it,
All
yeah,
yesterday.
okay.
I have some friends in Idaho that would be really
Yeah.
interested in this too.
So you're gonna take 10 of us, put us in a group from this group? Is that?
We're gonna take the whole group.
The whole
If
group.
anybody who wants to participate,
So we're gonna
would you raise your hand if you would like to participate?
Okay.
Okay. Only Julie does not want to participate. I was surprised.
Yes, I do.
Like you don't want to raise your hand. I'm like seriously, you don't want to? You don't want to play?
Well, I
So
don't know.
and girls, I have you on here. I have 4 girls.
Like, be over it.
I'm just gonna go ahead and put your names down because you were here.
Okay, let's end this and then we can.
Yeah. Okay. We'll get
Okay.
ready. Okay. All right. So that
Okay,
we'll send
so
that out.
thank you, everybody.
Yeah.
So this is the 3rd time I've done something like this, so this is beginning to get some traction. Harold Skousen, one of Cleon's sons down in St. George, he's on board. We're going to go down and do an organizing meeting there in St. George with Harold. So
I have an uncle.
Chris Kimball's
in
United
Idaho
Women's
Falls that
Group. They're all
loves to
starting.
do this.
I'm sorry.
I have an uncle in Idaho Falls that would.
Okay, right.
But
So I'm trying
that's-
to organize my life so I can be freer to be able to even travel out and do things like this. So
I have somebody I'd like to give your number to.
okay.
Yeah.
So Robin, just take it away.